Okay, this is the bottom end of a 1987, but it should be the same for 1986, 87, and 89. We're going to go through tearing down the bottom end for those that might want to know. So, guess we'll get into it. We'll probably start on the clutch side here. Go ahead and remove the dipstick. Jesus. Go ahead and remove your dipstick. Before you start this, you should already have the engine out of the bike. And your top end already disassembled. I have videos, earlier videos of removing the top end. Next, you want to go ahead and grab you a pick. You can use a number 2 Phillips, but a number 3 works better. So grab you a pick. Start making sure all these Phillips heads aren't packed with dirt, that way you get a good bite. Like I said, a number 3 works best. You can do this with a manual impact. A lot of people do. But I prefer just to go ahead and use a electric impact. You know, just give it a little love tap on the trigger. Don't give it the full beans. And we got one there that doesn't seem like it wants to come out. Alright, let's apply a little pressure. Nope. That bolt doesn't seem like it's going to come out. That's fine. You can drill off the head later. This is just a cover. There's really nothing behind it. Next, let's go ahead and take off your oil filter cover. Again, they may be these Allen heads may be packed full of dirt. Let's go ahead and make sure they're cleaned out. Let's see. Yeah, it's this one here. I have no clue what it is, guys. It's got some rust on it. I can't read it. Go ahead and pull it. These bolts are steel, so you may have some, and the casing's aluminum, so you may have corrosion, which makes them hard to get out. So some of these you may have to do by hand. I'm going to attempt to do this in like 30-minute segments, so I don't know if this entire thing will be on one video or not. There we go. Be mindful that some of these bolts do double as casing bolts. This long one, so keep track. If you're planning on rebuilding an engine, not using it for parts, you may want to keep up with what bolt went where. And do expect some oil to come out of this, because it is the oil cover. There we go. And now I'm making a mess. Well, that don't do nobody no good. This oil filter was garbage. Busted. Wasn't doing no good, wasn't catching nothing. Which might explain why this engine is toast. This engine had catastrophic failure. This is on the this engine's on the was on the 285 that's on the channel that we're currently working on. I swapped it out because the piston rod is discolored almost halfway down the rod itself. The pin was seized. I've got it on a video of me removing it. I had to use a bearing press puller to even get it out. Alright. Next, let's go ahead and remove the adjustment nut. I believe it's a 10. Don't quote me on that. No. Let's go up to a 12. There's the money. This bolt right here is on a shaft with a flathead slot in it. That's for adjusting your clutch, the tension for your clutch. And I don't believe that's a washer. I believe that's part of the case. It looks like it. Alright. Next, let's see if we can make another mess and remove the clutch cover housing. Again, take a pick, make sure all these Allens are cleaned out. You can get a bite. These on the top look good. There's 3 across the top here from this notch. There is, if you've already removed your starter, one of the bolts is that holds the bracket for the starter right here, the backing plate. There's also one of the cover bolts for this. Then you have 3 going down past it and 1 directly under the oil pump or oil filter housing. These, however, are all matted up with stuff. So let's clean them out.
Baby, Texas, you want to try, baby. I know you can, I know your heart, and you will figure out you love me now.
Alright, looks like all those boys. Switch back to our number 3. Start under the oil pump housing, or oil filter housing. Give her a little rugga-dugga. And of course, it doesn't want to come out. Take your bit and a hammer, and give it a couple of love taps. Try it again. Still a no. That one's gonna fight us. So we can turn this up a little bit. There's the bolt in question. You can clean out around it. So if we can get a pair of locking pliers on the situation. Truthfully, I don't know why Yamaha in their wisdom decided to use Phillips bolts for this instead of Allen keys all the way around. It would have been so much easier. Let's see if we we can get a pair of locking pliers on it. There it goes, it just broke free. When you do your rebuild, if you destroy any of these Allens, you can easily go to Tractor Supply, anywhere anywhere it sells hardware. All these are M6s, M4s, and M8s. They're not really hard to get a hold of. Another one will not come out. Can't always be pleasant, guys. And you will make a mess doing this, so be prepared. Have towels if you don't want it everywhere. As you can see, what I was talking about on the oxidation corrosion, because these are steel. Camera will focus. This white stuff, that's oxidation. Steel and aluminum don't play well together, unfortunately. So sometimes getting these bolts out can be a dedicated pain in the ass. Be careful when you're wrapping with your hammer. You don't want to bust the case. Loose. And it's still going to be difficult. Usually when I rebuild these engines, I just replace these bolts. It's not that big a deal. You can also find them online. Some of the longer ones you may have to order specifically for length, because the hardware store may not carry them. Yeah. This bike has been into before, at least on Plex side, because some of these are a little rounded. If you by happen to have one it doesn't or hasn't been torn into, you may not necessarily have so much problem. Yeah. Like some of these, it's a little longer. You may have to specialty order Allen style for it. These are M8s by M8 by 1.5 or 125. I think it's 125. You can order them online. You can just order just about everything for these. I'm just going to go ahead and move it. I don't necessarily think this is going to be a rebuild. They cooked the rod, if I had to suspect. The crank bearings are probably cooked in it as well. If not, they're severely worn. The seals probably cooked. If I had to take my guess, I would assume they restarted this engine for oil. Had an oil leak, which is usually from the stator cover. It developed an oil leak. They were topping it off. Riding it around for a few hours, forgot to check the oil and got too low, went to cooking. We're working on this bolt here. You may not necessarily be able to see it. I'm still getting used to being on camera and doing everything with camera and making sure you guys can see. Like I said, bear with me. I'm working on it. I'm so used to doing all this stuff by myself, not even really talking to anybody other than myself, which will probably be a lot of these videos. I mean, you guys don't want to hear me talk. I mean, just turn the volume down. I have a tendency to rant. Two come out. This one does have a little washer on it. Some of them do. I believe originally they are supposed to all have little copper washers on every one of these bolts. But do not quote me on that. I have not worked on one of these engines that somebody else hasn't already been in. I'd probably have better luck at it if I had.
Figure out you love me now, 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 you know I gotta leave you.
But if you want to keep it original and you do want the Phillips bolts and you destroy them getting them out, it's not a big biggie. You can usually buy on eBay, you can pick up a parts lot, just random bolts, and you should get 90% of what you need. If you choose to replace these with Allen style instead of Phillips, they are measured online in millimeters. So, you know, M8, you know, bolt size, and then length will also be in millimeters. So, save your old bolts, mark where they went if you're going to replace them, or if you destroy them. Take you a measuring tape or ruler with millimeters, measure them out, look up that size bolt, and, you know, whatever size Allen, and good to go. That should be all of our bolts for the clutch cover. Next, the little tang right here. Never exactly knew what it was for. I'm assuming it's for maybe a four-wheel drive version of this bike. I've never seen one. I've never seen anything really located here. But, takes off a couple taps on it. Hear that noise change? That's the seal breaking loose. Right here, if you can see it in the camera, there's a notch wallowed out. You can take you a pry bar, sit in between it, give it a little wiggle. If that doesn't work, take you a punch, a socket, whatever you have. Put it on this side facing the case, give it a few wraps. These do have locating dowel pins. They are pretty notorious for getting rusted to them. So you may have to work it back and forth. Don't get discouraged. It is what it is. You don't want to stick screwdrivers or anything in between the gaps. That's a good way to destroy your mating surface. Okay, sorry guys, I don't know what happened to my camera. I had already gotten most of this off. But you just keep wiggling from this spot and this one with a couple of hammers till it slides off. Slide off like it right there. That nut we removed before is for this, for the adjustment. It's on this arm. If you can see it in the camera. That arm rides on this with a spring. This is part of your shifter mechanism. You got a spring, you got a top piece. The notch on the top piece corresponds with a little shaft sticking out here. You have a triangle piece with roller bearings, like that right there. Then you have the back piece, if I can get it slid out. Has a little notch on it. It corresponds with the other little tang right here. Each one of those roller bearings sits inside the little groove on either side, if you can see it. Sits like that. And pretty much that orientation. Next, you're going to want to remove your centrifugal clutch or primary clutch. Everybody calls it something different. Something to notice, you see that discoloration right here, right in the center, all the way around this thing? That means this centrifugal clutch has gotten really hot. As I said, I suspect this engine was overheated from lack of oil. That's what killed the crank, or the piston rod, con rod, whatever. But next we're going to go ahead and pull this. You're going to need a 1 1/8". You are going to need a big impact for this. But we already did this before, so sorry. Pull it off. To get that nut off, there's a plate behind it with 2 tabs, usually from the factory. One is bent and the other one's just flat. This one has been bent in both places, so somebody else has been in here on the clutch side. These 2 dowels on the back side of it correspond with 2 holes. So when you go to reinstall this, if you're rebuilding, you line them up in the holes, like it right there. Right. Now when I took this off, I had to take a hammer and tap the back of this to get it off. It might be a little easier this time, I don't know. Something else you guys should see. Notice how these are flat, right? But if we turn it, or I'll just see, you got one here that's not flat like this. It's kind of ovaled out. You want this, there's one on each side of this basket. You want to bring it all the way, rotate it until you're connecting to this shaft on the back side, and you want that ovaled out piece right here. That way the splines can slide out back past the basket. Alright, we're going to rotate it until we find the spot. Right there we are. Let's see. It should slide out just like that right there. Nice and easy. Alright, part wise for this, you have the clutch basket itself. You have the clutch. There's a something like a big shim here that this roller bearing sits in. You want to make sure you got that, and that's where that goes. Next, you have a large thrust washer. Goes on that way. There should be wear marks. See how there's a wear mark on that side? So that side went towards the bearings. Then you have your centrifugal clutch assembly itself. Do not try to take these apart. It can be dangerous. They're spring loaded. But if you notice, this is kind of bluish colors, or a little purplish. These are blue, but on the front they're not. That means this thing has seen a good amount of heat. There's still plenty of grooves and notches. Well, this one's a little tore up right here. It got hot and it's starting to come apart. This centrifugal clutch or primary clutch is most likely on its way out. A new one of these, if you can find them, we're talking a couple $100. If you can find a good used one, that'd be the way to go. But all right, behind that there should be another thrust washer on the shaft right here. You don't need that. Next, we can go ahead and start pulling the clutch itself, secondary clutch. I want to say these are 10s, but like I said, don't quote me. No, they're not. Let's try an 8. Yeah, they're 8s. You can do these with a small impact driver to take them off. Do not, I repeat, do not put them back on with an impact driver or impact. Do them by hand. Ask me how I know. Oh. On the clutch side, you have a little shaft and a roller bearing sitting right in the center. You want to go ahead and pull those out before you lose them. Next, we're going to go ahead and take out these 4 bolts. They are spring loaded. Make sure you're removing. I'm sure there is a torque spec for these when you go to reinstall them. I've never went by it. I have the manual for this, but just lock them down when they get tight. They're tight. They're only like I think M4 bolts. There's not going to be a couple or very much torque on them at all. So you kind of use best judgment with that, or download the book or buy the book. And the torque setting should be in it, but I've never used it. I've got one I probably got, my most recent rebuild has probably got, I don't know, 30 hours on it. Like consecutive hours. Yeah, you got a square looking plate, 4 bolts, 4 springs. Next, we are going to see about removing the secondary clutch pack. There's a nut right here, like the one for the primary. It does have a tab behind it with tabs bent over. Only one is bent over, so nobody has took out the clutch packs on this bike. Somebody was obviously doing something with the primary. So, like with the first one, you just take a hammer, a chisel, a file, whatever you want to use. This one's a little harder because it likes to rotate. almost like a 15/16, guys. Be smart, grab you a rag to hold it. Don't chew any fingers off. Alright. There's your nut. Nut. Locking. The tabs that are bent here that correspond. Going 2 notches here. Next, you can go ahead and pull the whole basket. Should be able to. Sometimes you have to wiggle it. If you can't get it off that way, you can go ahead and pull the center. Turn the center up. Now, in between the center and the back, there is a washer. And it's on splines. That's why I couldn't just pull it off. If you wiggle it enough, you might be able to get it. But you can disassemble this pack one at a time. Just be careful. Friction. Steel. Friction, steel, friction, steel, friction, steel. Try to keep them in order. Friction, backing plate, here's that little washer I was talking about. Sits right there. Now you should be able to just slide the basket out. Now these tangs have to line up with the tangs on the basket, but you can just set it up here, rotate, rotate, rotate. There's your whole assembly. There's your whole clutch basket in order. Move the clutch. You want to go ahead and see about removing your old gasket if you can, because we have some bolts to locate. We have one right here, one above it, right there. If I remember correctly, there are 3, but I think it's this pin we talked about here a minute ago. So it's this pin, this screw, and this screw. 2 of them are Phillips heads, the other one's a bolt. Alright, we'll start with the bolt down here. It is a 12 millimeter. Alright, we'll start with the bolt down here. It's 12 millimeter. You guys still be able to see? Yes. Alright. There's that. Bolt, pin, whatever you want to call it. One Phillips right here. And of course, they are not wanting to come out. Seems to be a theme. This bike really don't seem, or this engine really don't seem to like me, which is odd. Engines usually love me. got those up, broke loose. And that is for our intermediate casing between our clutch cover and our main two half casings. You may have to tap it. Does like the clutch cover itself, it does have dowels. That it does get stuck on. Do it just like we did the main clutch cover. Hit from here and down here on the back side of one of the dowels. Do not, I repeat, do not go to prying. Tapping good, prying bad. Oh, be careful. We just had a dowel pop out. Oh, my bad. We have one other screw. It is under the shaft. I forgot all about it. Right here. Go ahead and see if we can get that one broke loose. Like I said, it's better to watch me do this, and if I mess up and crack the case, oh well, this is pretty much a junk engine anyway, it's just parts. What if I get a wild frog in my ass and decide to... Alright. There we go. Slides off that shaft. Does have a gasket behind it. For future info, the hardest part about doing these engines is going to be this gear here. It's got a lower sprog and an upper sprog. It's one unit. It connects to the splines with the counterbalance shaft and it runs the oil pump at the same time. These are incredibly hard to get off. Extremely. You usually have to use a shit ton of heat. Like, this is nice and shiny. Usually, they kind of turn black. You have to use about that much heat on them or put them in a press. I do not own a press. I never have to have a press enough to do this. It's about the only engine that has to have it. There's two variants. One's a solid gear. The other one, the gears are separated. And there's 4 pins and springs. But they're bad about snapping and then the engine not run. So I don't know if this was the revision or if the other one was the revision, because you could just separate the two. The smaller sprog would go through the casing where the bearing went. This one, it has to come off. So when you separate the case, you want to separate it from the crankshaft this way. And then you want to prop this side of the case up, heat this gear up really good, soft blow mallet, a wood block, whatever on the end of the crankshaft, and just go to beating the snot out of it. I think we'll call it here.